The scream tore through the white silence of the Wyoming mountains before being swallowed by the howling wind, and Yates Crawford knew, without seeing, that someone was in terrible trouble. He pulled his chestnut gelding to an abrupt halt, his breath forming clouds in the frigid December air as he strained to hear past the blizzard that had been building all morning. There it was again, fainter this time, a woman's voice carried on the bitter gusts that whipped down from the peaks above Opal. Without hesitation, he urged his horse forward through the deepening snow, following the sound toward a steep ridge where the trail narrowed dangerously. What he found made his heart clench with alarm. A bay mare stood riderless near the edge of the path, reins trailing in the snow, nostrils flaring with panic. Beyond her, halfway down the steep embankment, a figure lay crumpled in a massive snowdrift, the dark fabric of her riding coat standing out against the pristine white. Yates dismounted in an instant, securing both horses before carefully making his way down the treacherous slope, his boots sliding on the icy surface beneath the fresh powder. "Hold on," he called out, his voice rough from the cold. "I am coming to you." The woman was conscious, but her face was twisted in agony, tears freezing on her cheeks as she gripped her left side. She was young, probably around his own age of 26, with auburn hair that had come loose from its pins to spread across the snow like spilled wine. Her gray eyes met his with a mixture of relief and fear. "My hip," she gasped through chattering teeth. "I cannot move it. The horse spooked at something, threw me clear over the edge." Yates knelt beside her, his experienced hands already assessing the situation with the practiced efficiency of a man who had dealt with ranch accidents more times than he cared to count. He could see the unnatural angle of her left leg, the way she held herself rigid against the pain. A broken hip, no question about it, and they were miles from town with a blizzard bearing down on them like divine wrath. "My name is Yates Crawford," he said, keeping his voice calm and steady despite the urgency racing through his veins. "I work the cattle ranch south of here. What is your name?" "Nora Calloway," she managed, her voice tight with pain. "I was riding back to Opal from the mining camp where my brother works. I needed to warn him about the storm." The wind picked up, sending a fresh wave of snow cascading down around them. Yates made a quick decision, knowing that staying here meant certain death for both of them. The temperature was dropping fast, and Nora was already shaking violently, shock and cold working together to steal the life from her body. "Nora, listen to me," he said, moving closer so she could hear him over the wind. "I need to move you, and it is going to hurt something fierce. But if we stay here, we will both freeze before nightfall. The ranch house is about 7 miles southwest, and it is our best chance." She nodded, her jaw set with determination despite the fear in her eyes. Do what you must. Yates had carried injured calves, wrestled steers, and hauled feed sacks that would break a lesser man, but lifting Nora required a different kind of strength. He needed to be firm enough to get her up the slope, but gentle enough not to cause more damage to her shattered hip. He shrugged out of his heavy coat and wrapped it around her, then carefully slid his arms beneath her shoulders and knees. The moment he lifted her, Nora cried out, a sound that cut through him worse than any knife. Her hands clutched at his shirt, and he could feel her whole body trembling against him. "I know," he said quietly. "I am sorry, just hold on to me." The climb back up to the trail was brutal. His boots kept slipping on the icy rocks, and Nora's additional weight threw off his balance, but he pushed forward with single-minded determination. By the time he reached the top, his arms were burning and his lungs screamed for air in the thin mountain atmosphere. He managed to secure Nora on his horse, positioning her in front of the saddle so he could hold her steady from behind. Her head lolled back against his chest, and he could feel how cold she had become, her lips tinged with blue. "Stay with me, Nora," he said into her ear as he urged the horse forward, leading her spooked mare behind them. "Tell me about your brother. What is his name?" She stirred slightly, her voice barely audible. "Thomas. He is 2 years older than me, 28. We came out here from Ohio 3 years ago after our parents died. He found work at the silver mine, and I have been keeping house in town, taking in sewing to help make ends meet." "Ohio is a long way from Wyoming," Yates said, keeping her talking, knowing that if she fell asleep in this cold she might never wake up. "What brought you this far west?" "Adventure," she whispered, and he caught the ghost of a smile on her frozen lips. "Thomas wanted to make his fortune, and I wanted to see the mountains. Our parents had a farm, same land they had worked all their lives, same fields, same everything. I wanted something different." The snow was coming down so thick now that Yates could barely see 10 feet ahead. He knew this country like he knew his own heartbeat, had ridden these trails since he was a boy working alongside his father. The ranch had been in the Crawford family since 1867, nearly 20 years now, built on land that had seemed endless and full of promise back then. His father had died 2 years ago, leaving Yates to run the operation with help from a handful of loyal ranch hands. It was a hard life, isolated and demanding, but it was his life, and he had never wanted anything else. "Tell me about the ranch," Nora said, her words slurring slightly. She was fading, and fear spiked through him. "We run about 300 head of cattle," he said, raising his voice to combat both the wind and her growing lethargy. "Got a good herd, sturdy breeds that can handle these winters. The house is nothing fancy, built from lodgepole pine with a stone fireplace that my father and I constructed ourselves. There is a barn, a bunkhouse for the hands, corrals, all the necessities. In the spring, the meadows fill up with wildflowers and you can see clear across the valley to the mountain peaks." "Sounds beautiful," she murmured. "It is," he said. "Nora, I need you to keep talking to me. Tell me about Ohio. What did you do there?" She took a shuddering breath, and he felt her trying to rally her strength. "We had apple trees, rows and rows of them. In the autumn, the whole farm smelled like cider and cinnamon. My mother made the best apple pies in the county. She tried to teach me, but I was always more interested in riding horses than cooking." "Is that how you learned to ride so well?" he asked, adjusting his hold on her as the horse navigated a particularly rough section of trail. "My father taught me. He said every person should know how to handle a horse, boy or girl. My mother disagreed, said it was unladylike, but Papa always won those arguments." There was warmth in her voice now, memory thawing some of the cold. "What about you? Did your father teach you to ride?" "He did," Yates said. "Taught me everything about ranching, about reading the weather and the land, about which cattle would thrive and which ones to cull. He was a hard man, but a fair one. I wish you could have met him. He would have liked your spirit." They rode in silence for a while, the only sounds the crunching of hooves in snow and the relentless moan of the wind. Yates kept checking the sky, watching the light fade as the storm intensified. He knew they were still at least 4 miles from the ranch, maybe more in these conditions, and Nora was getting heavier in his arms as she lost the strength to hold herself upright. "Yates," she said suddenly, her voice sharp with pain. "I think something is wrong. Everything feels cold, too cold." He tightened his grip on her, his own body heat the only thing keeping her from succumbing completely to hypothermia. "We are almost there," he lied, knowing it was still a long ride but needing her to believe help was close. "Just a little further. You are doing so well, Nora. You are the strongest woman I have ever met." "I do not feel strong," she whispered. "I feel like I am disappearing." "Then hold on to me," he said fiercely. "Hold on to my voice. I will not let you go." He began to talk, filling the frozen air with words, anything to keep her anchored to consciousness. He told her about the first time he had ridden alone into the mountains as a boy of 12, how he had gotten lost and spent a terrifying night under a pine tree before finding his way home at dawn. He told her about the spring he had helped deliver twin calves during a late snowstorm, how he had stayed up all night in the barn making sure they survived. He told her about his mother, who had died when he was 15, a gentle woman who had loved books and music and had seemed too refined for the rough frontier life, but had never complained, never asked to return to the civilization she had left behind in Missouri. "She sounds wonderful," Nora said faintly. "She was," Yates agreed. "She used to say that love was not about finding easy circumstances. It was about finding someone worth enduring hard circumstances for. I think about that a lot, especially during the long winters when the snow piles up to the windows and the cattle need constant watching." "Have you ever been in love?" The question was barely a breath, but it hung in the air between them, intimate and unexpected. Yates considered the question as they rode through the white world. "No," he said honestly. "There was a girl in town a few years back, the school teacher's daughter, but she wanted a different life than I could offer. Moved to Denver to marry a banker. I think maybe I have been waiting for someone who understands this place, who can see past the harshness to the beauty underneath." Nora did not respond, and panic seized him. He shook her gently, calling her name until she stirred. "Still here," she mumbled. "Just resting my eyes." "No resting," he commanded. "Not yet. Sing something for me, anything." "I cannot sing," she protested weakly. "I do not care if you can carry a tune, just do it." Her voice was thin and wavering, but she began to sing an old folk song about a maiden and her true love, the words barely distinguishable from the wind. Yates joined in on the chorus, his own rough baritone blending with her soprano, and for a few minutes the storm seemed less fierce, the cold less biting. When the song ended, Nora said, "Tell me we are going to make it. I need to hear you say it." "We are going to make it," Yates said, and this time he meant it because through the swirling snow he could see the dark shape of the barn emerging like a miracle from the white. "Look, Nora, we are here. We made it." The ranch appeared gradually, solid structures materializing from the blizzard. Yates had never been so grateful to see the familiar buildings, the sturdy fences, the smoke that should have been rising from the bunkhouse chimney but was beaten flat by the wind. He guided the horse straight to the main house, dismounting carefully and lifting Nora down with the last reserves of his strength. She was barely conscious now, her skin frighteningly pale, her breathing shallow. He kicked open the door and carried her inside, the warmth of the house hitting them like a physical force. The fire in the main room had burned down to embers, but the house was still significantly warmer than the deadly cold outside. Yates laid Nora on the long couch near the fireplace, quickly building up the fire until flames roared and heat flooded the room. Then he turned his attention to her, removing his coat and her wet clothing with efficient, impersonal movements, replacing them with dry blankets and quilts from the chest by the wall. Her hip was badly swollen, the entire left side of her pelvis discolored and obviously fractured. Yates had set bones before on animals and once on a ranch hand who had been kicked by a horse, but this was different. The hip was a complex joint, and he knew that if he did this wrong, Nora could be crippled for life, but leaving it untreated was not an option. He found the whiskey his father had kept for medicinal purposes and tried to get Nora to drink some, but she could barely swallow. Her eyes fluttered open, focusing on him with difficulty. "What are you going to do?" she asked. "I need to check the brake, try to stabilize it," he said. "I will not lie to you, it is going to hurt. Worse than falling off a horse. She tried to smile, but it came out as a grimace. Probably, he admitted. But you are tough. I saw that out there in the snow. You never once asked me to give up. I wanted to, she confessed. So many times I wanted to tell you to leave me, save yourself. But you kept talking, kept telling me stories, and I could not do it. I could not let you carry me all that way for nothing. Yates felt something shift in his chest, a warming that had nothing to do with the fire. He had spent the last few hours fighting to save a stranger's life, but Nora did not feel like a stranger anymore. She felt important in a way he could not quite define, as if the universe had thrown her into that snowdrift specifically so he would find her, so their paths would cross in this violent, unexpected way. "This is going to be rough," he said, positioning himself carefully. "Try to stay still." What followed was the worst kind of necessary cruelty. Nora screamed when he manipulated the joint, checking for the extent of the damage, and tears streamed down both their faces, his from sympathy and hers from agony. When it was finally over, he had done what he could, patting the hip and binding it tightly to keep it immobile. It was not professional medical care, but it would have to do until the storm passed and he could get her to the doctor in Opal. Nora had passed out from the pain, which was a mercy. Yates covered her with more blankets, checking her pulse and breathing regularly as the hours passed. He warmed broth and managed to get her to swallow some when she briefly regained consciousness, then watched over her as night fell and the blizzard raged on outside. Somewhere around midnight she woke fully, her eyes clearer than they had been all day. Yates was sitting in a chair beside the couch, and he leaned forward immediately when he saw her looking at him. "How do you feel?" he asked. "Like I was trampled by a herd of buffalo," she said, but there was a hint of humor in her voice. "Where am I exactly?" "My house." "The main ranch house. You have been in and out for hours. How is the pain?" "Bad," she admitted. "But bearable. Thank you, Yates. You saved my life out there. I would have died if you had not found me." "I could not leave you," he said simply. "It never even occurred to me to consider it." They looked at each other in the firelight, and something unspoken passed between them, a recognition that the ordeal they had shared had created a bond that went deeper than mere gratitude. Yates had felt her heartbeat against his chest for hours, had heard her fears and her stories, had fought beside her against death itself. And Nora had trusted him with her life, had held on when giving up would have been easier, had sung for him through the pain. "Tell me about the ranch again," she said softly. "I want to picture it in the daylight." So he did, painting word pictures of the valley in summer when the grass grew tall and green, of the cattle dotting the hillsides like moving stones, of the creek that ran cold and clear from the mountains, perfect for cooling off on hot August days. He told her about the garden his mother had planted, now overgrown but still producing hardy vegetables each year. He told her about the wild horses that sometimes came down from the high country, magnificent and untamed. "I would like to see that," Nora said wistfully, "if I ever walk again." "You will," Yates said with absolute certainty. "It will take time and it will be hard work, but you will heal. I will make sure of it." The storm continued for 3 more days, trapping them in the house together. Yates tended to Nora's needs with patient care, helping her eat and drink, changing the bandages on her hip, carrying her when necessary with the same gentle strength he had shown on the mountain. They talked for hours, filling the isolated space with stories and laughter and gradually deepening understanding. Nora told him about her childhood in Ohio, about sneaking out to ride horses when she was supposed to be learning needlework, about the books she loved to read, adventure stories and poetry that transported her far beyond the boundaries of the farm. She told him about the grief of losing her parents within months of each other, her father to a heart that simply gave out, and her mother to the sorrow of losing him. She told him about the decision to come west with Thomas, how frightening and exhilarating it had been to leave everything familiar behind. Yates shared his own history, the loneliness of running the ranch alone after his father's death, the satisfaction of building something lasting with his own hands. He told her about the challenges of frontier life, the constant battle against weather and predators, and the simple logistics of survival. But he also told her about the rewards, the beauty of a sunrise over the mountains, the pride of watching a calf he had helped deliver grow into a strong steer, the deep contentment of falling asleep at the end of a hard day's work. On the fourth day, the storm finally broke, leaving behind a world transformed by snow. The sun came out brilliant and blinding, reflecting off the white landscape until it hurt to look at it. Yates opened the door to find drifts piled high against the house, the barn nearly buried, and the world utterly silent in that particular way that only comes after a major storm. "I need to check on the cattle," he said, pulling on his heavy coat. "And I should try to get you to the doctor in town. The road will be rough, but I think we can make it through." Nora was sitting up now, still pale but considerably stronger than she had been. "Your cattle should come first," she said. "I can wait a few more hours. They cannot." It was the right thing to say, the response of someone who understood ranch life and priorities. Yates nodded gratefully and headed out into the snow. What he found was better than he had feared. The herd had taken shelter in a grove of pines on the south side of the property, and while a few animals showed signs of frostbite, none had been lost. His ranch hands emerged from the bunkhouse, relieved to see him, and together they set about the work of caring for the stock and clearing paths through the snow. It took most of the day, but by late afternoon, Yates had hitched up the wagon and prepared it with blankets and heated stones wrapped in cloth to keep Nora warm. He carried her out carefully and settled her in the back, propped up on pillows to minimize the jolting of the journey. The ride to Opal took 3 hours, the horses struggling through the deep snow while Yates walked beside them much of the way, breaking trail. Nora bore it with the same quiet strength she had shown throughout the ordeal, only the tightness around her eyes betraying the pain each bump and rut caused. Dr. Harrison was a gruff man in his 50s who had seen everything the frontier could throw at him. He examined Nora thoroughly while Yates waited in the outer room, pacing like a caged animal. When the doctor finally emerged, his expression was cautiously optimistic. "You did good work," he told Yates. "The hip is badly fractured, but you said it well enough. She will need to stay off it completely for at least 6 weeks, maybe longer, and then a careful period of recovery and strengthening. She might always walk with a limp, but she will walk. You saved her leg, maybe her life, with how quickly you got her warm and treated." Relief flooded through Yates so powerfully his knees went weak. "Can she be moved?" "Not for a while," the doctor said. "She needs to stay still, let the bone begin to knit. Does she have family in town?" "A brother, Thomas Calloway, but he is up at the mining camp and probably will not be able to get down here until the snow clears from the higher roads," Yates said. "That could be weeks given how much fell." "She will need constant care," Dr. Harrison said thoughtfully. "I suppose she could stay here. I have a room I use for patients sometimes, but someone would need to be with her most of the time, and I am often out on calls." Yates made a decision that felt inevitable, as if it had been made the moment he pulled Nora from that snowdrift. "She can stay at the ranch. I will care for her. I have been doing it for days already." The doctor raised an eyebrow. "That would be unconventional. People will talk." "Let them talk," Yates said firmly. "She needs help, and I have a house with spare rooms and time to look after her properly." It makes sense. What he did not say, what he was only beginning to acknowledge to himself, was that the thought of being separated from Nora now felt wrong in a fundamental way. She had become part of his life in the span of a few intense days, and he was not ready to let her go. Dr. Harrison studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "I will check on her weekly once the roads are clearer. Make sure she stays immobile, keep her comfortable, and watch for fever or any signs of infection. And Yates, be careful. A woman's reputation is a fragile thing out here." Yates knew the doctor was right, but he also knew that his intentions were honorable, even if his feelings were becoming complicated. He went in to see Nora, who was lying on the examination table, her face drawn with exhaustion. "The doctor says you need to stay still for weeks," he said. "I want you to come back to the ranch where I can look after you, but if you would rather stay in town, I understand." Nora met his eyes steadily. "I trust you, Yates. If you are willing to take on that burden, I would rather be at the ranch. I felt safer there than I have felt anywhere since leaving Ohio." Something in his chest expanded at her words. "It is settled then. Let me get a message to your brother through the mining company office. Let him know you are safe. Then we will head back." They returned to the ranch in the deepening twilight, the snow-covered landscape glowing pink and gold in the setting sun. Yates had set up a proper bedroom for Nora in his parents' old room on the ground floor, with a view of the mountains through a wide window. He had changed the sheets and built up the fire, making it as comfortable as he could. Over the following weeks, a routine developed. Yates would wake early and tend to the ranch work, checking on cattle, repairing storm damage, and managing the endless tasks that winter demanded. He would return to the house around midday to fix lunch for both of them, sitting with Nora and sharing the meal while they talked. Afternoons were often spent reading aloud. Nora had spotted his mother's small collection of books on a shelf, and Yates found himself rediscovering stories he had not thought about in years, his voice filling the quiet house with tales of adventure and romance. In the evenings, after the ranch hands had retired to the bunkhouse, and the world outside faded into frozen darkness, Yates and Nora would sit by the fire, and the conversations would deepen into territory that felt both thrilling and dangerous. They talked about dreams and regrets, about what they wanted from life and what they feared. They discovered shared values and complementary differences, a matching of spirits that seemed unlikely given how recently they had met, but felt undeniable nonetheless. "I never expected to end up here," Nora said one night in early January, about 3 weeks after the accident. She was sitting up more easily now, the color fully returned to her face, though she still could not put any weight on her hip. "When I woke up in that snowdrift, I thought I was going to die. And now I am in this beautiful house with a view of the mountains, being cared for by the kindest man I have ever met. Life is strange. Kind is not a word most people use to describe me," Yates said with a slight smile. "I have a reputation in town for being hard and solitary." "Maybe people have not bothered to look deeper," Nora suggested. "You are hard when you need to be. I have seen that in how you manage the ranch. But you are also gentle and patient. You carried me 7 miles through a blizzard. You sat up nights making sure I was breathing. You read me poetry even though I know you would rather be reading agricultural journals." He laughed at that, a warm sound that filled the room. "You are right about the journals, but I like the poetry more than I expected. Or maybe I just like watching your face when you listen to the words. You look transported, like you are somewhere far away from this cold mountain valley." "I am happy here," Nora said softly. "That is what surprises me most. I thought I would be desperate to get back to my own life, my own house in town. But I find myself dreading the day when the doctor says I am healed enough to leave. The air between them seemed to thicken with unspoken feelings. Yates set down the book he had been holding and moved to sit on the edge of the chair near her bed. "Nora, I need to tell you something, and I want you to know you do not have to respond or feel any pressure, but I would regret it forever if I did not say the words out loud." He took a breath, gathering courage. "I am falling in love with you. Maybe I started falling the moment I saw you in that snowdrift, so fierce and brave despite your fear. Or maybe it happened more slowly over these weeks of talking and laughing and discovering who you are. But either way, it is happening, and I needed you to know." Nora's eyes filled with tears, but she was smiling. "I have been waiting for you to say something. I have been in love with you for at least 2 weeks, maybe longer. I kept thinking I was being foolish, that it was just gratitude or the closeness that comes from surviving something terrible together. But then I would watch you working outside, see the care you take with the animals and the land, listen to you talk about your dreams for this ranch, and I would know it was real. I love you, Yates Crawford." He leaned forward and kissed her, a gentle meeting of lips that held the promise of everything they had been dancing around for weeks. When they pulled apart, both were breathing hard, eyes bright with emotion and desire that would have to wait until she was healed but was no less powerful for being restrained. "When you are well," Yates said, his voice rough with feeling, "I am going to court you properly. Take you on rides through the valley, show you all the places I love, let you see the ranch in every season. And then, if you will have me, I am going to ask you to marry me and stay here forever." "I will have you," Nora said, laughing and crying at the same time. "I am saying yes right now to save you the suspense. Yes to courting, yes to marriage, yes to building a life here with you. This place already feels like home in a way Ohio never did, and I think it is because you are here." They spent the rest of the evening making plans, dreaming aloud about the future they would build together. Yates told her about wanting to expand the herd, maybe add some horses for breeding. Nora talked about her sewing skills, how she could take in work from town to contribute financially, maybe even teach other women the fine embroidery techniques her mother had taught her. They discussed the house, which rooms might need work, how they could make it truly theirs while honoring the history of Yates's parents. Thomas Calloway finally made it down from the mining camp in late January, when the high passes cleared enough for travel. He was a tall, broad-shouldered man with the same auburn hair as his sister, and his face was tight with worry when Yates met him at the door. "Where is she?" Thomas demanded. "The message said she was hurt bad. I came as soon as the roads opened." "She is healing well," Yates assured him, leading him inside. "Come see for yourself." The reunion between brother and sister was emotional. Thomas dropping to his knees beside Nora's bed and gripping her hands while she reassured him that she was fine, that Yates had saved her, that everything was going to be all right. When the initial flood of relief passed, Thomas turned to Yates with serious eyes. "I owe you a debt I can never repay," he said. "If you had not found her, if you had not gotten her here and cared for her, I would have lost the only family I have left in this world." "I did what anyone would have done," Yates said, uncomfortable with the gratitude. "No," Thomas said firmly. "Most people would have left her, told themselves it was too far, too dangerous, not their problem. You did more than duty required, and I will remember that." Over the next few hours, as they all talked together, Yates saw Nora's eyes constantly moving between him and her brother, clearly wanting to tell Thomas about their relationship but uncertain how he would react. Finally, during a lull in conversation, she took the plunge. "Thomas, there is something you should know. Yates and we have grown very close during my recovery. We are planning to marry once I am fully healed." Thomas looked between them, his expression unreadable. Then slowly, A smile spread across his face. "About time someone told me. I could see at the moment I walked in the room the way you look at each other. Nora, are you sure this is what you want? You have known him less than 2 months." "I am absolutely sure," Nora said with quiet conviction. "I know it seems fast, but we have spent more time truly getting to know each other in these weeks than most courting couples do in a year. I love him, Thomas, and he loves me. That is all that matters." Thomas extended his hand to Yates. "Then you have my blessing and my thanks. Take care of my sister, help her to thrive, and we will have no problems." "I will spend every day of my life making sure she is happy," Yates promised, gripping Thomas's hand firmly. Thomas stayed for a few days, sleeping in the bunkhouse and getting to know Yates through working alongside him. By the time he left to return to the mining camp, the two men had developed a mutual respect that would grow into genuine friendship over the years. Thomas promised to come down for the wedding whenever it happened, and to visit as often as the work and weather allowed. February passed in slow recovery, each day bringing small improvements to Nora's mobility. Under Dr. Harrison's supervision, she began to carefully put weight on the injured hip, taking tentative steps with Yates supporting her. The pain was still significant, but she approached the rehabilitation with the same determination she had shown during the blizzard, refusing to give in to frustration or despair. By March, she was walking with a cane, moving slowly but surely around the house and even venturing outside on clear days. As the doctor had predicted, she had a noticeable limp, her left hip unable to extend quite as fully as before the injury. But she was walking, and that was triumph enough. "I want to try riding," she announced one morning in early April as the snow finally began to melt in earnest, revealing the brown grass of winter underneath. Yates looked at her skeptically. "The doctor said you should wait at least another month before attempting anything like that." "The doctor is cautious, which is admirable, but I am going insane inside these walls," Nora said. "I do not mean riding across the valley, just sitting on a horse, getting used to the feeling again. I need this, Yates. I need to prove to myself that I am not going to be afraid forever." He understood that, the need to confront fear before it could take root and become permanent. "We will try with my gentlest mare and I will lead her, just a few minutes around the corral. If it hurts too much, we stop immediately." The process of getting Nora mounted was awkward and painful, but once she was settled in the saddle, her face transformed. Joy and relief flooded her expression as the horse stood quietly beneath her, and when Yates led the mare in a slow walk around the corral, Nora laughed aloud, a sound of pure triumph. "I can do this," she said, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I was so afraid I never would again, but I can do this." They made it a daily ritual, gradually increasing the time and eventually allowing the horse to walk without being led. By the end of April, Nora was riding independently around the property, her hip strong enough to handle the movement, though she still had to be careful mounting and dismounting. With spring came new life on the ranch. Calves were born in the warming fields, and Yates taught Nora the skills of checking on them, identifying problems, helping with difficult births. She proved to be a natural, her gentle hands and calm demeanor perfect for working with the animals. The ranch hands, initially skeptical about having a woman around, came to respect her competence and work ethic. On a warm evening in late May, with wildflowers beginning to dot the meadows and the mountains still crowned with snow, Yates took Nora riding to his favorite spot on the property. It was a high meadow overlooking the valley, with views that stretched for miles in every direction. They dismounted and sat together on a flat rock, watching the sun paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. "I first came here after my mother died," Yates said. I was 15 and angry at the world, at God, at death itself for taking her. I rode up here intending to just scream at the emptiness. But when I got here and saw this view, all that anger drained away. I realized that life was full of beauty and pain all mixed together, and you could not have one without the other. That understanding shaped everything I have done since. It is perfect, Nora said softly. I can see why you love it. Yates reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. Inside was a simple gold ring with a single small diamond, his mother's wedding ring that his father had given him before he died. Nora Calloway, I know I said I would court you properly first, but I think we have been courting all along, just in our own way. We have been through more together in 5 months than most couples experience in a lifetime. I love you more than I thought it was possible to love another person, and I want to spend every remaining day of my life proving that to you. Will you marry me? Nora was crying again, but her smile was radiant. Yes, 1,000 times yes. I want to be your wife, your partner in this ranch and this life. I want to wake up next to you for the rest of my days and build something beautiful together. He slipped the ring onto her finger and it fit perfectly, as if it had been made for her. They kissed there on the rock as the sun set and the first stars appeared, sealing promises that would last a lifetime. They were married in June in a small ceremony in Opal, with Thomas giving Nora away and Dr. Harrison standing up as Yates's witness. The entire town turned out, curious about the romance that had blossomed from such a dramatic beginning. Nora wore a simple white dress she had sewn herself, with lace at the collar and cuffs, and she walked down the aisle of the small church with only the slightest limp, her hand resting lightly on Thomas's arm. When Yates saw her, his breath caught. She was beautiful, radiant with happiness, and the knowledge that she was choosing him, choosing this life, filled him with awe and gratitude. The ceremony was brief but heartfelt. They spoke traditional vows, promising to love and honor each other through all the challenges that frontier life would throw at them. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Yates kissed Nora with tender passion, and the congregation burst into applause. The reception was held at the ranch, with tables set up outside and food contributed by neighbors and friends. There was music and dancing, and though Nora could not dance for long due to her hip, she and Yates shared several slow waltzes, holding each other close while the sun set over the mountains. Happy, Yates murmured into her ear during one of these dances. Beyond words, Nora replied. I keep thinking about that day on the mountain, how terrified I was, how certain I was that I would die in that snowdrift. And now look at us. All that pain led to this joy. It is almost too much to comprehend. I have been thinking about it too, Yates admitted. About how many small coincidences had to align for me to be on that trail at that exact moment. If I had left an hour earlier or later, if you had taken a different path, if the storm had come in faster or slower, we would never have met. It makes me believe in fate or providence or whatever you want to call it. I think we were meant to find each other, Nora agreed. The universe just had a rather dramatic way of making it happen. As the evening wore on and the guests began to depart, Thomas found Yates standing alone for a moment, watching Nora talk animatedly with some of the ranch wives who had welcomed her into their community. Thank you, Thomas said simply, for making my sister happier than I have ever seen her, and for giving her a home that is worthy of her spirit. I am the one who should be thanking you, Yates replied, for coming to Wyoming with her, for being at that mining camp so she was riding this way, for raising a sister who is brave and strong and perfect. I am the lucky one in this equation. Thomas clapped him on the shoulder. Take care of each other. That is all any of us can do in this world. Their first year of marriage was a season of adjustments and discoveries. Nora threw herself into ranch life with enthusiasm, learning the rhythms of cattle management and contributing her own skills in ways that improved the operation. She set up a sewing business from the house, taking orders from women throughout the valley for everything from simple mending to elaborate wedding dresses. The extra income allowed them to hire an additional ranch hand and begin modest improvements to the property. Yates, for his part, learned to share both his space and his decision-making. He had lived alone for 2 years and been independent for longer than that, but Nora had opinions and ideas, and more often than not they were good ones. She suggested planting a larger vegetable garden and selling the surplus in town. She convinced him to invest in better breeding stock, improving the quality of the herd. She befriended the wives of the ranch hands, creating a sense of community and mutual support that made the isolated ranch feel less lonely for everyone. Their love deepened through shared work and quiet evenings, through weathering a difficult calving season and celebrating when a new well they had dug struck clean water. They learned each other's moods and habits, figured out how to fight productively when they disagreed, and discovered that partnership meant both independence and interdependence balanced in careful measure. In the spring of their second year together, Nora discovered she was pregnant. The news filled them both with joy and trepidation. Dr. Harrison was honest about the risks. Nora's injured hip could complicate childbirth, but he assured them that with careful monitoring, there was every reason to expect a positive outcome. The pregnancy progressed well through the summer and into the fall. Nora continued working on the ranch until she grew too large and awkward to safely navigate the uneven ground, then focused her energy on preparing the nursery in what had been a spare room. Yates found himself overcome with moments of pure terror, imagining all the things that could go wrong, but Nora remained calm and confident. "We survived a blizzard and a broken hip," she reminded him whenever he voiced his fears. "We can survive this too. Women have been having babies since the beginning of time. I am strong, and I trust Dr. Harrison, and I trust you to be there with me." She went into labor on a cold November night, almost exactly 2 years after Yates had found her in that snowdrift. The labor was long and difficult, complicated by the old hip injury just as the doctor had feared. There were hours when Yates thought he might lose her, when he held her hand and prayed to a God he was not sure he believed in, bargaining for her life with desperate promises. But Nora was a fighter and she had fought death before. Just after dawn, with the sun breaking over the mountains in shades of gold and rose, their son was born. He was small but healthy, with a powerful set of lungs that filled the room with his cries. Dr. Harrison placed the baby in Nora's arms, and she looked up at Yates with exhausted triumph. "We have a son," she said wonderingly. "We made a person." Yates was crying openly, overwhelmed by relief and joy and a love so fierce it felt like it might crack him open. "You are amazing," he managed to say. "You are the strongest, most incredible woman who ever lived." They named him William, after Yates's father, with Thomas as his middle name to honor Nora's brother. Uncle Thomas rode down from the mining camp as soon as he got word, arriving with gifts and tears, cradling his nephew with tender awe. "He looks like you both," Thomas said, studying the baby's face. "He has Nora's eyes and your jawline, Yates. He is going to be handsome and stubborn." "A perfect combination," Nora said, laughing. Parenthood brought new challenges and rewards. The ranch work did not pause for sleepless nights and feeding schedules, but they adapted, learning to function on less sleep and to share child care duties in ways that were unconventional for the time but worked for them. Yates would carry William in a sling while checking on cattle, talking to his son about the land and the animals, beginning an education that would span years. Nora would set up a cradle in her sewing room, working on orders while the baby napped nearby. William grew into a bright, curious toddler who loved horses and open spaces, his mother's adventurous spirit already evident. When he was 2, Nora announced she was pregnant again, and this time the process was easier, her body knowing what to do. Their daughter arrived in the spring, a healthy girl they named Elizabeth after Yates's mother. She had her father's dark hair and her mother's determination, and from the moment she could walk, she was following her older brother everywhere. The years flowed past in the way they do when life is full and purposeful. The ranch prospered under their joint management, growing from 300 head of cattle to nearly 500. They added a stable for breeding horses, tapping into Nora's love of riding and her skill with the animals. The house expanded with additions to accommodate their growing family. A son named Jacob arrived 4 years after Elizabeth, completing the family with 3 children who were the perfect blend of both parents. Thomas eventually left the mining camp and took a position in Opal as the assayer for the local mines, wanting to be closer to his sister and her family. He became a constant presence at the ranch, the beloved uncle who taught the children to fish and told stories about their mother's childhood in Ohio. He never married, claiming that he was too set in his ways and too devoted to his work, but Yates suspected that Thomas simply had not found anyone who could match the deep bond he had with his sister. Through it all, the love between Yates and Nora only grew stronger. They still rode together to the high meadow on special occasions, sitting on that same rock where he had proposed and watching the sun set over the valley they had built their life in. They would talk about the children, the ranch, their dreams for the future, and the shared past that had brought them together in such an unlikely way. "You ever regret it?" Yates asked on one of these evenings, 23 years after he had pulled her from that snowdrift. Their hair was graying now, their bodies marked by age and hard work, but the connection between them was as vital as ever. The life you might have had if you had not fallen from that horse. You could have married someone in town, had an easier existence. Nora looked at him with the same fierce love she had shown throughout their marriage. Never. Not for one single moment. Yes, the fall was terrifying, and yes, my hip still aches when the weather turns cold, and yes, this life is harder than anything I could have imagined back in Ohio. But Yates, every challenge we have faced has been worth it because we faced it together. You are my partner, my love, my home. I would fall from 1,000 horses if it meant ending up here with you. He kissed her then, there on the rock as the sky turned to fire and the mountains stood eternal around them. Below in the valley, the ranch spread out like a promise-kept cattle grazing peacefully. The house with its warm windows glowing in the twilight, children who would carry their legacy forward into the next generation. "I love you," Yates said. "From that first moment in the snow until my last breath, I will love you." "And I love you," Nora replied. "Thank you for saving me. Thank you for carrying me home." They sat together as the stars emerged one by one, 2 souls who had found each other in the midst of a blizzard and built something beautiful from that desperate beginning. The wind blew gentle and warm now, carrying the scent of wildflowers and fresh grass, so different from that bitter December day when their story had started. But some things had not changed at all. The strength of their love, the beauty of the land, and the knowledge that they had been given something rare and precious. A partnership that would endure through all seasons, as constant as the mountains and as infinite as the Wyoming sky. Their children grew and eventually had children of their own, some staying on the ranch to continue the family business, others venturing out to find their own paths in a changing world. but they all carried with them the story of how their parents met. The romantic tale of a cowboy who had carried a woman miles through a blizzard to save her life and ended up finding his own reason for living. Yates and Nora lived to see their grandchildren, then their great-grandchildren, each new generation a testament to the love that had bloomed in the harsh winter of 1884. They passed away within months of each other in their 80s, both having lived long, full lives rich with purpose and affection. They were buried side by side on a hill overlooking the ranch, their graves marked with simple stones that bore their names, their dates, and a single line, "Together through all seasons." The ranch remained in the family for generations, the house preserved and expanded but still containing the original rooms where Nora had recovered, where their children had been born, where countless evenings had been spent in conversation and companionship. And sometimes, on winter nights when the wind howled down from the mountains and snow fell thick and fast, the descendants of Yates and Nora Crawford would gather around the fire and tell the story of their ancestors, of a love that had been forged in hardship and tested by time, of a cowboy and a woman who had saved each other in all the ways that mattered, creating a legacy that would endure as long as the mountains stood watch over the valley they had loved.